Call the Personnel Committee to order. And I think does everybody have a copy of the agenda? Okay, so the main purpose of our meeting is the proposed revision to the fiscal year 2021 employee compensation plan. And Ms. Matthews, do you want to kind of take that or from here?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Councilmember Gilbert. So I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint presentation that Darlene and I thought might be helpful when you're talking about numbers. If you can just give me a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So just kind of wanted to maybe just start with just sort of refreshing everybody's memories about where we've been and the problem we've been trying to solve. The next few slides are going to look very familiar to the Personnel Committee because these were taken from my presentation from Budget Work Session 1 back on, I think it was April 30th. So as you all know, we undertook a compensation and classification study back in fiscal year 2018. That study entailed an assessment of the city's salary and benefit structure, and the prior comp and class study conducted on behalf of the city was done 12 years earlier. Evergreen Consulting was the firm that we hired to conduct the compensation and classification study in FY 2018, and we are continuing to work with the firm today. When they did the study back in fiscal year 2018, one of the primary findings was that our employee salaries were clustered below the existing salary range midpoints. And what you see on the screen was sort of a breakdown of where our employee salaries were at that point in time. Part of Evergreen's work involved collecting data from other public entities for 54 benchmark classifications. They then took that data and basically compared it to the average market. And what you'll see on the screen is that, and these are averages for those 54 benchmark positions, but on average, the city's minimum of its salary range was about almost 12% below. Midpoint was about almost 14%, and also we were off from a salary structure standpoint by about 14% at the maximum. In response to this information given to us by Evergreen, the then Mayor and Common Council approved putting a new market competitive salary structure in place in July of 2018. And in July of 2018, we also began the process of implementing the study results, which, as you likely recall, was going to be done in 3 phases. So phase 1 of that process was budgeted for in FY 2019. That was, once again, when we adopted the new salary structure. The focus of phase 1 was bringing employee salaries up to the new minimum of the pay grade as was warranted. And we had approximately 90 employees whose salary had to be brought up to the minimum of their applicable pay grade. Phase 2, which was implemented during the current fiscal year, FY 2020, was the city's initial step to address salary compression issues. Obviously, when you have 90 employees whose salaries have to be brought up to minimum, what ends up happening is you have a lot of employees sort of bunched together at the minimum of the salary range. As part of phase 2, we had about 100 employees who received a compensation and classification adjustment as part of phase 2. And so kind of bringing us up to the subject of today's conversation. So the budget that I presented to the Mayor and Common Council on on April 27th included funding for what I'm calling the original implementation plan for phase 3. This was basically another step in our effort to address salary compression issues as originally envisioned and is currently reflected in the budget for FY 2021. Phase 3 would be a mirror image of the adjustments granted in phase 2. So as things currently stand and as reflected in the FY 2021 budget, about 80 employees would receive phase 3 adjustments. And the budgeted cost that's already in the budget that you've considered, all funds, is approximately $78,000. Kind of fast forwarding to the Mayor and Common Council meeting of May 11th, as you all know, The direction by the elected body on this date was that the Recreation and Parks Director, Ms. Gruber, was charged with coming up with a plan to eliminate the fitness center operating deficit. There was a Recreation and Parks Committee meeting yesterday, and then the Finance Committee will also be reviewing her plan Friday morning as part of their committee meeting. Staff was also directed on this date to develop an enhanced Phase 3 comp and class implementation plan, and the Mayor and Common Council stated desire on May 11th was that they wanted the enhanced plan to allow the city to make more headway in dealing with salary compression issues. Ms. Childs, who is on the phone and certainly should jump in at any time, and I have basically worked with Evergreen and gone through a myriad of plan options in the intervening roughly 2 weeks, kind of trying different options, seeing what the impact of those would be. The plan that we are about to present to you all actually wasn't developed until this morning. So we have tried to make sure that we reviewed the file, I guess, to the best of our ability. Certainly, if we find anything that is different than the information I'm presenting, we'll let you know, but it has been a fairly complicated process. And so this plan, like I say, was developed this morning. The Phase 3 plan that we are proposing this afternoon basically is a completely new plan. And as I mentioned, we've gone through a number of iterations, and I think where Ms. Childs and Evergreen and I started was initially trying to take the initial Phase 3 plan and sort of tweak it. I think we concluded over the last day or so that that was not the direction to go. So as I said this morning, we came up with an entirely new plan and new approach. So basically, the plan that we're presenting now is an entirely new plan. It basically is no longer a mirror image of the Phase 2 adjustments as we originally envisioned. What we instructed Evergreen to do was basically, update employee class tenure through July 1st of 2020. And the reason I wanted to call that out is when the original Phase 3 plan was a mirror image, it basically sort of froze in time employee class tenure through July 1st of 2019. Ms. Childs, did I explain that accurately?
Yes, you did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So the plan that we are asking you to consider this afternoon would have 108 employees receiving comp and class adjustments as part of Phase 3. The estimated cost for all funds is approximately $156,000. One thing I did want to note is that $156,000 does not include the full cost of associated increases in fringe benefit cost. Obviously, we had accounted for the original $78,000 in fringe benefit cost, but we still need to calculate those numbers. The reason why this is material is that for each $1 increase in sworn police staffing salaries, the city experiences a 44-cent increase in benefit cost. For each $1 increase in salaries of non-sworn staff, the city realizes an increase of 19 cents in various fringe benefits. So we still have yet to basically work through all those fringe benefit cost impacts pending your discussion this afternoon. Did want to remind you all, I'm sorry.
Let me interrupt real quick. I'm pretty sure, Joe, you know why that is, but Ann, just to make sure you're clear, do you understand the difference in the two in terms of sworn versus the rest of staff? Why there's, because of LEOPS? Okay, I assumed you knew, but just to be safe, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
okay.
I kind of put that together.
Yeah, it's because it's LEOPS.
Yeah.
So they're in a completely different retirement program.
That's fine.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and that exemplifies the differences in terms of the cost of those programs. Thanks, Ms. Matthews.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there, as Councilmember Cavacci alluded to, there's a very radical difference in what the city contributes for the two retirement plans. I happen to have the numbers in front of me. So we contribute almost 35% of an employee's salary to LEOPS compared to about just a little over 10% for someone who's in the regular state plan.
Okay.
But that's what drives most of the cost. So I did want to remind you all that the proposed FY 2021 budget also includes funding for wage adjustments for some employees outside of the phase 3 comp and class, whatever that ends up being. Our benefited staff, which based on our current staffing pattern includes 149 staff members, are also scheduled to receive a 2% across the board adjustment effective with the first full payroll in July. The current projected cost all funds of that 2% across the board adjustment is $156,000. And I want to say that number has been slightly tweaked since I presented the budget on April 27th, just to reflect staff members, who've come and gone. The average employee salary increase associated with that 2% across the board adjustment is about $1,042. Obviously, that's going to vary. It's a percentage-based increase, so that will vary by employee. So what does this all look like? Basically, the chart was basically trying to show you all sort of what this might look like. So once again, going back to the original phase 3 plan had an associated cost all funds of about $78,000. We're now looking at a cost of $156,000, and that number is strictly salaries. That, once again, that does not include any kind of benefit cost. We would be going from about 80 employees receiving a phase 3 adjustment to 108. The average phase 3 salary adjustment, and once again, these are averages, so it kind of runs the gamut, would go from anywhere from about an average of $983 to about $1,140. And the average percentage adjustment for phase 3 would go from 1.8 to about 2.7% with what we're proposing today. And I think with that, we just wanted to see what questions you had. Darlene, is there anything I missed that you wanted to basically jump in and say?
No, Barb, I think that you've covered it very well.
Okay. I think with that, we'll just kind of throw it open to the committee for any questions that you all have.
I have a few, but I don't need to go first if you guys have some.
No, Tony, go ahead. I have a few, but I've got a feeling you may question.
Okay. You good, Joe?
Before, yep.
Okay. So, Barb, can you go back to the, I think, are you able to bring the last slide up? Or if that's a problem, don't worry about it.
No, it's easy enough. Just give me just a minute.
Okay.
You want the very last slide, the comparison chart is what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it was the comparison chart. I think is the one.
Sure, just give me just, not a problem at all.
Yeah, awesome.
Oops, that's not the one you care about. Sorry about that.
It's germane to the moment. Okay.
Yes, it is questions.
So this goes 80 to 108 employees. So this.
Correct.
Part of, I think, what our original hope of beefing up the funding in phase 3 was to really address decompression. And I guess we, without drilling down, which I know you guys have done, let me back up. First of all, thank you for all the work that I know you have put into this, and I'm sure Darlene and probably a number of other staff members have put into it. Knowing that you just got this together today tells me how much you probably put into the previous portion of it and had to scrap it when you realized it wasn't going to work. So I'm sure you've been scrambling.
Well, yeah, if I can jump in, it was mostly Darlene, a little bit me, but it was almost entirely Darlene and no other staff. So the credit goes to her.
Thank you, Darlene. I'm sure a lot of work went into this, and hopefully we don't have to tear it all apart. Hopefully, once we get through talking about it a little, I'm sure it'll all be well worth it. So decompression was, I think, our primary focus. I'll speak for myself, was my primary concern when it came to moving this from the $78,000 to what ultimately is going to be probably about $200,000, because just a rough calculation of, say, 30 couple percent going to benefits based on that 156 number puts us at around 202, 205, which would account for that entire amount we talked about, right? So that is correct, right, Darlene? So we're probably looking at somewhere around maybe 40 couple thousand, 45,000 in benefits, roughly, kind of just super ballpark. Darlene?
She's still on.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
For some reason, I didn't unmute. I would
No, that's okay.
that would be about right. We
Okay.
really have not done any calculations at all.
Yeah, I just took, that if you take the 10% for a portion of them and then the 44% for the cops, just ballparking that into the mid 30s, it puts it at like 205 or something, just roughly. So assuming that's what we're working with here, the goal for me, and I believe some of my colleagues, or maybe all of them, was to really address decompression as much as anything else. Because we had some levels where we had folks that, had a fair amount of tenure that were in a position, and then they had someone that had much less. And through phase 1 and 2, those two numbers became very close together in terms of what their pay rates were. And the hope was to address some of the decompression, as well as spreading some of it around, I think, to a broader base of the employees, which it looks like we're doing. I mean, it's 108 are affected by this. What is our total count now of employees?
I believe we had 149 in this file.
Okay, so yeah, we're addressing 65%, 2/3 of the staff, or almost a little more than that. So I guess let me get to the point. What I'm trying to understand is this addressing the decompression issue that some of us or all of us are trying to address at certain levels? Because I can't tell by looking at what you've given us.
Darlene, you want to take that, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've tried looking at that. I think one of the things just to remember in the difference between the 108 and the 149 is, obviously, if you're an employee who just started, you don't have a compression issue because you just began. We have some other employees who, I guess the way to look at it is that, and this is probably a more technical thing to say, you have to have been in your, and Darlene, please correct me if I'm wrong, your current classification for at least 1 year as of July 1st, 2020. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
So that employee would still get a 2% across the board because that's not tied to comp and class. But if you haven't been in your position a year as of July 1st, you really don't have compression issues.
Right.
There are some other employees, because Darlene and I were anticipating this, and she can probably speak to this in more detail than I can, but we have, for example, I think we have 4 people who are in the police academy who are recruits. Mm-hmm. Well, they remain in their recruit classification until they basically they graduate from the academy and become certified. They will then move to a probationary police officer. So there will be a salary adjustment that's not a phase 3 adjustment for them, mm-hmm. but will be tied to basically they're moving to another grade. We did try to look at some numbers, and it's hard because there's, since we began this process almost 2 years ago, employees have come and gone. So trying to get to looking at static numbers. I think with what Darlene and I looked at this morning after we sort of arrived at this option, we made some headway in the current fiscal year, and we will certainly make, with the additional funding you all have provided, more headway. With not having gone through a comp and class study for 12 years, and then I wouldn't want anyone to think that this is entirely making up for that, and I certainly say that to employees all the time, but we are certainly, with the enhanced funding that you all have given us to work with for phase 3, able to make much more headway and allow much more spread between employees who were at one time bunched up. I think we started that process in FY 2020, and that will continue.
Okay. Yeah, without seeing a giant NFL schedule looking like chart of salaries and comparisons, it would be impossible to, which I'm sure you guys have kind of done. I will take your word for it that it sounds to me like you've done your best to try to get to where we're hoping to get to relative to that. So yeah, okay. That's really all I had. What this will take effect when, if we implement this budget when will these numbers start hitting? July 1st?
It's not July 1st. It's whatever the day that the first full pay period starts. So
Okay.
I'm not sure what that is without looking at a calendar
okay.
really quickly, but we always tie everything to the start of a pay period so we don't have to get into trying to prorate things. But that will be the effective date for both the phase 3 adjustments we've talked about as well as the 2% across the board. It all goes in at one time.
Okay. Again, I just want to say thank you. I know a lot of work went into this, and you said Darlene did the lion's share of it. So thank you, Darlene. I know that we sort of threw you a curveball a little bit when we came back and said we wanted to do more, but I'm sure, knowing the two of you, you're happy to do it, considering this is going to be more money in our employees' pockets in the end. And it looks like a pretty significant percentage of them when all said and done. So thanks for your effort on that. That's all I have.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Matthews, I just have one question. So, and this may easily have been addressed to all of you prior to my hopping on the council. I understand this is phase 3. So is there
Right.
any need in the future after we complete phase 3 to make sure that we maintain the comp and class, any increases other than the normal COLAs? Will we be then caught up basically regarding comp and class, or will there need to be another phase? Just asking.
It's a good question, Councilmember Gilbert. What we have included, and I don't know that we specifically have talked about this in the midst of all the other issues you all have been dealing with in the budget process, we have included some funding in the FY 2021 budget to have Evergreen do some market testing to see how our salary ranges are holding up. So the salary ranges that we're still working with, and this was always the plan, you know, this will be the 3rd year that the salary ranges have stayed the same. And part of what we tried to do back in FY 2019, sorry, I'm getting my fiscal years mixed up here, was to try to set the salary ranges so that they would have some integrity for the 3 years. We are going to need to kind of test the market and kind of see how our ranges are holding up, because obviously we want to make sure we're competitive in terms of hiring and retaining people. So I think that's step 1 in answer to your question. And then certainly, you know, depending on what we're seeing in the marketplace, you know, whether we call it a phase 4 or you call it a new phase 1, I think we will just need to be sensitive, I guess is the best way to put it, in terms of the money we dedicate to salaries in FY 2022. To make sure that if we change the salary ranges, we're continuing to progress people through the new ranges, so we don't end up with a repeat of the same problem we had with people bunched up at the bottom. So I know that's sort of a rather convoluted answer to a very direct question, and I apologize for that. I think we're just going to have to kind of crystal ball it, but we're certainly cognizant of the fact that this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on. Typically, I would recommend you do a comp and class study at least every 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything else to add?
No, not necessarily to add. No, I mean, everything's pretty clear to me. I don't have any questions, and you know, I think the things I was going to ask were already covered, so I'm good.
Okay. All right, Ms. Matthews, do we need to propose anything, or how are we?
I think
the consensus. How would you like us to proceed?
I don't know that you necessarily need to take a vote, Councilmember Gilbert. I think we do have a Finance Committee meeting posted for Friday morning, and I think the way I put the item on the agenda was that the Finance Committee would be considering a recommendation of the Personnel Committee. So I think it can either be done by consensus or by vote. I think Ms. Childs and I would just like to make sure that, you know, that if we share the same information with the Finance Committee, that it has the endorsement of the Personnel Committee.
Okay. Tony, I'm good with this and to proceed on to the Finance Committee. Are you good?
I'm good. I do have a question though, and you will be able to, you two were privy to it. I was not. You guys had your Recs and Parks meeting yesterday. While this is outside of the purview of the Personnel Committee, it certainly falls under the purview as the council as a whole and the mayor's responsibility. But I'm assuming there was a plan put forth yesterday relative to what we discussed to fund this phase 3. In other words, taking the money from the Rec and Parks budget and putting it into this phase 3 study. That there was a plan put forth to do that. Okay, so as far as the funding vehicle goes, that's covered from your meeting yesterday. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. Just I felt like I at least had to ask because I knew you guys had the meeting, but wasn't 100% sure what the outcome was. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and I believe, Ms. Matthews, that will all depend on the Finance Committee's agreement or continued recommendations from yesterday's meeting and today's meeting that both things continue on, correct?
You have that correct. The one thing I did just want to remind everybody is that anything to do with the fitness center is only impacting the general fund. Certainly the plan that we've presented to you today is going to impact water, sewer, and fiber. So, you know, they're kind of two separate funding mechanisms, and we'll go over that with the Finance Committee, but just wanted to make sure we clarified that with this group as well.
Great.
Well, I guess Councilwoman Gilbert, may I speak?
Yes.
Okay, I was trying to remember who I was. So I did just want to clarify something you just asked. If it's up to the Finance Committee, it's really not. Like the Finance Committee is going to look through it and make a final recommendation. But remember that everything that we discussed yesterday, especially the pricing, is going to go into, it's going to be an ordinance.
Yes.
And maybe in the future it'll be a resolution and we need to talk about that. But this is the final approval is going to be the entire council and my signature. So it's not really, it's just as other committees go through this, the Finance Committee looks at what all the committees are doing with finances and make sure it works together and then makes a final recommendation to the council. But just to clarify, like it's up to the whole council and myself to actually say, okay. So, yeah.
Sorry, I guess I should have.
Well, and I say that too, because I know, look, I know someone else might be watching this too. I just want them to know the process. So whether or not you realize that, I just wanted everyone listening to know who's, you know, it's not just one committee really. We're just a bunch of people making recommendations.
Yes, we'll all be holding the bag in terms of responsibility when it comes down to passing this budget for sure.
Okay, are we good to move on to other matters? Are we good? Okay.
We are, if you are.
I'm good. So other matters is our next part of the agenda, and I just wanted kind of an update on our finance director and HR position. And I did notice you sent out an email, but whatever you could elaborate, Ms. Matthews.
Sure. With your concurrence, Chair Gilbert, I'll kind of touch on the HR director first because that's going to be brief. As you all know, when we, or likely recall, when we brought the contract forward at the end of April, I guess, maybe it was just about a month ago, I believe, we basically had advised Novak as well as Mayor and Common Council that we would probably do 2 separate notice to proceed based on Ms. Child's plans regarding her retirement. So that notice to proceed for the HR director position was given to Novak just well, I guess what is today, Wednesday? It was a week ago, so on the 19th. So where we are with that process is Ms. Childs and I are basically going through answering some technical questions that Novak provided to us. We did just earlier today get the links to the feedback survey that you all previously received for the finance director. We will be sending that out, if not today, tomorrow. So we'll be asking for the Mayor and Common Council's feedback on the HR director position, as well as getting input from the department directors as well as the staff in the HR department. So that will all be happening, if not today, tomorrow. Relative to the finance director position, I did send out, and I realize that you may not have had a chance to look at it. So I'll just sort of walk through. But what I sent you all was basically the kind of the schedule with NOVAC. And Councilmember Gilbert, would you like me just to sort of provide some highlights for anybody who might be watching, as well as those of you who maybe didn't have a chance to review this information? I don't want to be disrespectful of your time, but okay.
Yeah, just briefly, the highlights is great. Will be great.
Okay. Okay, so just from a where we are advertising standpoint for the finance director position, we'll be advertising in the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA. We'll be advertising in the International City County Management Association, their website, which also includes department director positions, the League of Women in Government, the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, the Maryland Municipal League, the Virginia Municipal League, the Pennsylvania Municipal League, as well as LinkedIn. And the job announcement will also be posted on the NOVAC Consulting Group website. In talking to NOVAC, I think we kind of agree that our probably target audience, which they will do some, individual outreach to people who they know might be interested, would be finance directors, assistant directors, budget directors, and assistant budget directors in the DC metro area, and Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. They're also going to be reaching out to other state GFOA chapters, who have kind of membership listings. As I mentioned, the job announcement will be placed on the NOVAC's website, and then they'll also be advertising the position through NOVAC's LinkedIn page, Facebook, and Twitter pages. So that's sort of kind of the reach of where we will be advertising with NOVAC and their efforts. Before I move on, are there any questions about just where we're placing job announcements or who we're targeting from anyone?
I actually have a question. Are we posting anything locally for either of the positions? Because I would assume there's some local talent here, and I would particularly like to focus and see what we have maybe locally, as a lot of our residents are familiar with our city and our county, and I think that would be a big advantage. I don't know, but I'm just asking whether we are advertising locally to see if we can pull from our local residents.
Ms. Childs, what are your thoughts about that? I believe we sometimes have advertised in the Baltimore Sun and the Washington Post, but your department would actually be placing those ads. Could you comment on Councilmember Gilbert's question?
Yes, I can. We have done that in the past, and we use them quite a lot. They would mainly be internet, online ads. We could also, of course, put it on our website. Then everything would feed back to NOVAC Consulting. But I think we could ask NOVAC to add that without any issue.
Tony, what are your thoughts on that? I'm kind of new, so
I think for the finance director position, I don't know that would bear much fruit. That's a pretty specialized position because it's GASB. And you really, for that position, we're going to need somebody who's got years of experience specific in government accounting, which limits that pool significantly compared to most CFOs and people like that. I think my gut tells me that for that position, those individuals are going to be members of these associations anyway. And if they're looking, they're going to know how to find, and that's posted. The HR manager position probably is a little bit broader based in terms of, there's still government specific stuff that position has to understand. But I think there, again, I'll just speak for myself. I'd be more willing to look at someone maybe without necessarily tons of government experience, just good HR experience, not so much for the finance position. So maybe there it would make sense, but for the finance director, I think we'd probably be wasting our money doing that. And frankly, if it's okay, can I follow up? Or did you have more, Ann? Because I did have something specific sort of related to that. So you guys, was NOVAC the one that suggested LinkedIn? Or was that us?
Yes, they were.
Yeah, well, what I just said about about everything local. I almost feel the same way about LinkedIn. I mean, I'm looking at these costs, and LinkedIn is by far the most expensive of all these costs in terms of advertising the position. And I really wonder, I would tend to think, again, on the finance director position in particular, I think these people would be already involved in these organizations to an extent anyway. But I'll defer to Novak. I mean, they know what they're doing, and if they think LinkedIn is important, it's not that much money. So you know what?
Okay.
Never mind. Just scratch what I just said.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that in my business life, over the last couple of years, we've switched entirely over to LinkedIn when we're recruiting, because per dollar spent, we're getting the best quality applicants. Now, I also agree with what you said about the finance director. I did want to ask. I guess it makes sense to ask Ms. Childs how specialized she thinks maybe HR and government is versus other HR positions. Obviously, it's different, but in your opinion, Ms. Childs, how different is it?
There are a lot of differences, but I do think someone with some, very good HR background could come in and be able to learn what they needed to learn.
Yeah.
I do think that you'll probably have a lot more local HR folks apply.
I agree.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and that's what I thought. I especially, I know it's still good. There's still going to be differences, but especially if someone's been in HR in any large organization, they're going to deal with a lot of the same stuff, I suppose. So I guess most.
A lot of things are this. Yeah, a lot of things are the same.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know.
Deal with the same
Just
regulations.
confirming what I thought, but I just wanted to. I thought we'd ask you since you're the. Well, I guess you and Miss Matthews are the HR experts, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Matthews, she came up through HR, right?
She's by far more than I am for her own job. And I did want to mention that the places we just listed were obviously part of the specific recruitment plan for the finance director. We'll be happy to share the recruitment plan for the HR director once we get to that point.
Great.
But I think Councilmember Cavacci raised an excellent question. I would say usually to governmental accounting, as he indicated, is an entirely different animal than what people use in the private sector. And I will say that oftentimes that private sector experience doesn't transition well to a governmental setting, oftentimes. So if there's no questions about where we're planning to post the job ad, I'd like to just sort of briefly go through the schedule, if that's okay with you, Councilmember Gilbert.
Yep. Proceed.
Okay. I just actually, while we've been on the phone, Darlene and I had a few last minute edits to the recruitment brochure. So Novak just sent that to us. So we'd be happy to, after we review it and make sure it's good to go, forward that to the committee members and to the entire mayor and common council so you have an opportunity to see it. So as of, we're planning to, start the recruitment officially tomorrow. The advertising will be placed. This will be an open until filled recruitment. I did want to just one minor change since I sent you the file earlier based on looking at the brochure language. As opposed to the schedule I just sent you earlier today, instead of a first review of applications on July 2nd, Novak is recommending July 6th to get past the 4th of July holiday. So I'll be happy to just send you an updated schedule so you have it. We are anticipating, after Novak starts review on July 6th, that we will have either an in-person or a virtual meeting with Novak on July 20th to basically finalize kind of the first round of interviewees. We're anticipating reference checks and background checks being conducted and reviewed and releasing all but the top finalists, some more or less around that July 20th date after we speak to Novak. They'll be presenting candidates and we'll be kind of going through the list with them. We're expecting first round interviews, and I think the schedule is kind of how we work it out with everyone else, but anticipating interviewing 5 to 7 semifinalists on August 3rd, and depending on where the people are coming from, obviously we've already paid to have people come in from out of state. We would probably go ahead then and immediately do the second round interviews on the morning of August 4th. our thinking in terms of the interview panel, which is what we've done with our last 2 director hires. Interview panel would be myself, Ms. Childs, the mayor. For the finance director, would be the Council President Pecoraro. We usually invite the chair of the applicable committee. And then we have typically included 1 to 2 technical experts from that field. So we would be looking to have invite 2 finance professionals from other organizations to sit on the interview panel. What we did with Mr. Depot's hiring is we had Ms. Childs and I just did sort of a follow-up, more informal discussion to kind of just see what questions the candidates had. We did that in a more informal setting. I believe it was either over breakfast or lunch. And then hopefully, pick somebody in early August. Obviously, when someone actually starts, will depend on where that person lives, what their employment status is, how much notice they have to give for any position that they're currently holding.
Okay.
Darlene, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you've covered it very well.
Okay. Any comments, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Kavachi?
I think it's all pretty straightforward.
And I think I agree completely with your thoughts in terms of who's going to do the interviewing. I think that's all the right people.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can maybe get, 1 or 2 good technical experts like we've been fortunate enough to do so far with our other hires.
Yeah, I don't have any questions or concerns. I would like to see maybe the HR position maybe advertised locally. Other than that, I'm good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And Councilmember Gilbert, once we actually are a little further along and have a, kind of an identified recruitment plan for that position, as I said, it's only been about a week since we gave the notice to proceed. We'd certainly be happy to share that information with you and your colleagues on the committee by email, or certainly if you'd like us to schedule a quick meeting to walk through everything at that time, we'd be happy to do that as well.
Perfect. Great. Do we have anything else, Ms. Matthews? Is there anything else that we need to bring up?
Not that I have. Ms. Childs, do you have anything that you wanted to share? I know you're working on a lot of insurance-related matters and things of that nature.
I can say that the Lincoln Financial transition is moving along. We're planning on doing that, having everything out to employees very soon, and that will also take effect July 1. That's really the main one that we've been working on now. We've been working on the open enrollment, but that's just for the medical, dental, and vision. But that's just the same as last year. So it's taking a little bit longer to do the life and disability. We have to get all new beneficiary forms filled out. So it's just a process that we have to go through. And we're working on that right now.
Well, Ms. Childs, we're doing our best to throw as many really long, tedious processes at you on your final stretch here. So we'll keep it up. We'll keep trying to figure out what else we can throw at you.
Trying to get our money's worth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I was hoping that we sort of hit the mark on this version of the enhanced phase 3 plan, because I think if Darlene had to go through one more iteration, she might be moving that retirement date up on me.
That's great. You did a good job.
Yeah, thank you both for all that work.
Thank you.
Unless we have something else, I'd say we're down to adjournment.
Good seeing you all. Have a great rest of your week.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.